Hello and welcome to another episode of Guitar and Pen, a songwriter's notebook. I'm Mark Will, author, songwriter, and publisher in permanent exile, currently based on the island of Taiwan. And I'm joined once again by my good friend Craig Branch of the Can't Find My Way Home podcast. He's joining us from Germany. Hello again, Craig.
Afternoon, Mark. Nice to see you after all this time.
Afternoon for you. It's almost 11 p.m. for me, but
it's the witching hour.
We'll see if I
man.
can stay awake. It is the witching hour, yes. We'll see if I can stay awake. So today we want to talk about what Samuel Beckett can teach us about songwriting, if anything. We're going to focus specifically in this 7th episode of Guitar and Pen on Beckett's radio play Words and Music. This was written in 1961 or 62. I've seen different dates, but sometime around then. And it's one of, 2 or 3 or 4 radio plays that he composed around that time. So what can he teach us about songwriting? I've always been interested in this play mainly because of the title, Words and Music. When I myself, as a songwriter, release new material, I always say Words and Music by Mark Will, inspired by this particular title. So, I thought I should probably devote an episode of Guitar and Pen to this work to try to explain why that's the case, why this particular piece is important to me, and what it can teach us about songwriting, music production, music appreciation, what, if anything. So maybe we should discuss our initial impressions of the actual work. Like, you listened to it as I did in the past week or so. What was your experience like? I listened basically once all the way through. I had heard snippets of it before, but I listened to the whole thing. And we're talking, by the way, about the version. Here are a couple of theater posters. But we're talking about the version with, oops, not this. See, this is why you have to be careful with the slideshow. So we're talking about the version with words by Beckett and music by, I already forget the guy's name, Morton Feldman, is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could say Beckett is words, Morton Feldman is music. Backing up here, I wanted to think of it in a different way too. We've got this split, words and music, also known as lyrics and music. It reminds us of Bowie's Sound and Vision, or Vision and Sound. In the world of opera, it could be the libretto versus the score. And in the world of hip-hop, it's the flow and the beat. So those are terms. I mean, this split it seems to be common in all different types of music, right? Like, unless it's instrumental music, this is a dichotomy that exists across genres. Exactly. Yeah.
So maybe I can tell you a little of my listening experience. And so I came at it having never heard it before, and I listened to it. Unlike you, I listened to it more than once because it's quite challenging, right? If I put it in that way. So the first time I heard it, I didn't know what to expect. So when I heard it, and I thought, all right. And then I tried it I tried it without headphones, with headphones. I tried it when I was, I listened to it when I was doing some other things. I tried to kind of get a different experience as I was doing it. And then there was a couple of times when I just listened to it back to front or top. And so I didn't know anything about it until when you'd asked me to do it. So it was kind of interesting coming coming at it from that perspective where I didn't know what to expect, and there was all of these unexpected things. I don't know if we can give spoilers away, but this kind of use of
Go ahead.
Space and silence and repetition and the sense of time, and it was all a bit kind of I'd never heard anything like this before. And at the end of the experience, I wanted to go back and listen to it again in case I'd missed something. You know what I mean? There was something like I just found it really quite, as I said, challenging, but at the same time quite. You maybe want to dig around for a little bit more if you could, if you missed a nugget in there, or what was it exactly?
Well, how many times did you end up listening to it altogether?
Oh, say 5, maybe 6.
Really?
Yeah. But not like back to back. I mean, I didn't do it more than once a day.
Did you listen to the same version every time? Because
I listened to a couple of different ones, yeah.
Okay.
But the majority was the Feldman and Beckett version.
But, okay, so, yeah, that's an important point. There were other composers that Beckett worked with, or maybe even after his death, some composers have tried to compose music for this radio play. So there are different versions out there, but even the Feldman versions, are there differences in the performances depending on who produces it? I mean, they're still using his music, but a different orchestra or different, I guess it's really a chamber music ensemble. Is there great variety in the performances, or do they all sound pretty much the same?
I felt they pretty much sounded the same. There wasn't and then the more I kind of did a little bit of reading in the background and so on, and Beckett's insistence on whoever was doing his plays. There's an interview I watched with the actress Billie Whitelaw. I forget the play.
I know her.
Right. Then she goes into kind of great detail about I wanted to put a colon there or change a comma to a semicolon. Right, he was everything. Or if you pronounce something as an O or an A or whatever it was, you had to kind of do it exactly like he had it written on the page.
Oh yeah. Well, he in some of his other work, what's it called? Catastrophe is the one I'm thinking of. There's a director character that is basically a kind of tyrant. There's a really good performance with Harold Pinter in the role of the director. But there's kind of a tyrannical director in Words and Music too, which we'll discuss here in a minute. So for me, since we're sharing our experiences of the actual piece, I was very unimpressed by the music. I mean, maybe I didn't listen enough. Maybe one time didn't do it justice. Maybe I am being unfair to the composer in that sense, but it just I didn't feel compelled to listen again. I was much more
was it too sparse, or was there too much space in between the parts of the music?
Not so much that it just wasn't very interesting or moving in any way. I mean, we were streaming the avant-garde jazz piece by what's that bassist name? Barry Guy. These are pieces inspired by Beckett's writings, and I'll put those in the show notes. But that to me is like much more exciting and interesting. Like there's just nothing. Feldman's composition, his score, I guess you could say, to Beckett's libretto, if we can describe the contributions that way to a radio play. There's just nothing inventive about it. There's nothing daring or innovative or exciting. at least
Maybe,
on the
maybe
first
that's why,
listen.
but maybe that's why Beckett liked it so much. Then because it, it represented part of what he wanted the words part to be. Then.
Hmm. Did he like it? Did he? In your research, did you find him saying that he approved of Feldman's
I think they
composition?
had a bit of a friendship. Yeah, there was one bit I read where he sent him the lyrics to something, but on a postcard. Right, so Beckett
Hmm.
sent whatever lyrics it was. He mailed it on a postcard to him. And the other thing was they both disliked opera,
Hmm.
so they didn't particularly want it in that. So when I read that, it kind of made sense that they didn't want something overwhelming or something that would take away from the actual, words itself.
Yeah. Well, I don't know much about Feldman. I mean, he's considered a modern 20th century composer. He's not like a Schoenberg with the what's the Schoenberg compositional 12 tone 12 tone compositional style. I don't think he's like from that school, but like you say, very sparse, minimalist, I guess we could say,
Minimalist, yeah.
kind of like uh, Steve Reich in a way. But again, I would like to hear Steve Reich compose the music for this. That would probably be more interesting to me. Um, I didn't feel like it. If the music character, and we'll get into how words and music are actually characters in this radio play. If the music character is represented by the actual music, I don't feel like the character is very alive and fleshed out. Like
Mm.
the music is supposed to speak when Croak, the director, maybe Beckett himself, calls upon music. Music answers with music. There's what is described in the script as an adsum, meaning I'm here, right? Like so you want musically, you want um, the music to say I'm here, I'm present, yes. And I don't feel like it did that very effectively. I'm being hypercritical of
No.
Morton Feldman, but that's
What
that's
what
just
would you have preferred? I mean, you mentioned artist a minute or two ago, but minute or so ago. But what do you think would have made a bigger difference to it? Then the music actually to have said more, like literally.
yeah, just something more unique.
Mm-hmm.
It's like very standard, even though it's supposedly modernist. I don't hear anything that I haven't heard before, but that's modern music is not necessarily my genre, so maybe I'm not the best judge. But like what we were playing earlier, the Barry Guy, that's something I haven't heard before, at least not quite in that style. So it just just imagine when Croak calls on music, and then the answer is this crazy bass solo.
Mm.
It's just a more. I think it would make for a more engaging performance. Like the music should really.
Have a bit more oomph to it in that sense. If
Oomph, yeah.
that's a word
It
we
should.
can use.
I mean, it should be on the same level of the same level as the lyrics, the words,
Mm.
the vision. Like Beckett's. I don't think. Basically, I don't think Morton Feldman's music measures up to Beckett's words, if I have to put it that
Mm.
way. But I'm being hypercritical, and I'm also rambling. So
Well, it might be interesting to hear some other interpretations of it then, if we can find them for the show notes.
well, I saw like comments on the video I watched. A lot of people really liked it, and they're Morton Feldman fans. So maybe I should listen to some of his other work. It's just my first impression was like, it took me a while to. I had to stop and come back to it. I couldn't listen 40 minutes straight. It's like, oh, this is somewhat painful. And
it's tough going at times.
It was much more enjoyable for me to, you know, print out the script and just read it. And it's a quick read, you know, you can read the script in 5-10 minutes. So the music and I guess all the pauses and the silences, that's what makes it such a long work, or makes it seem so long. But yeah, if you had some really innovative, you know, interesting experimental music to complement Beckett's words, I think it would be a more effective radio play. So maybe I'm giving myself an assignment. Maybe I should like compose the music for music in this radio play. Like if I had to write the Adsum, what would I come up with? How would I compose that? That might be an interesting exercise.
Add it to the list.
Add it to the list, yeah, of self-imposed assignments. All right, so let's give a brief synopsis of the actual radio play for those who have not read it or listened to it or seen it, because apparently it's also, you know, a theatrical piece, not just a radio play which is only heard, but you can go to the theater and see it performed with actors. That would be an interesting thing. Did you see a YouTube video of that? I didn't.
No, I just kept it to the radio play. I didn't really dig much deeper, to be honest. So there might be stuff out there, but
yeah,
I think it's been performed quite, you know, I would say regularly. I think that it's been performed.
Yeah, I found those theater posters. So someone's, you know, staging productions with actual
one was in
actors
Italy,
on the
one
stage.
with Germany. I mean, there's
Yeah, exactly. So, it's kind of an allegory, this words and music, because you've got actual characters who are personifying these abstractions of words and music. So the words character is called Joe, somewhat prosaically, and the music character is called Bob. What do you make of that? Like, why does he choose such, you know,
ordinary,
commonplace, ordinary names to represent these ethereal concepts?
Aye, that's a good point. So it was before I listened to it, and then I dug up. I got an online version of the script, and then I read it. I read it following the script as well, and I'm not really familiar with a lot of Beckett's work, but maybe it's this kind of he uses these types of names in a lot of his works. The ordinary.
Oh yeah.
So it might just be a kind of. I was kind of thinking of. Anyway, so but yeah, that's what made me think of it, and I thought, well, maybe this is just a kind of reoccurrence, or this is the way he likes to kind of introduce it in this particular way.
Yeah, I mean, he's got another short piece called What Where, and there are 5 characters: Bam, Bam, Bim, Boom, and Bum. So he's got the, you know, consonant cluster BM, and then he just changes the vowel AEIOU, Bam, Bam, Bim, Boom, Bum. So I don't know, what does that tell us? He likes these simple, silly,
alliterative kind of ways as well, like with that one you were mentioning there.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can come back to this, but so music and lyrics are personified as Joe and Bob, and they're not really getting along in the beginning. They're kind of in conflict. And this is much to the irritation of Croak, who is possibly their master, or I don't know. How are
it's
we
undefined,
to interpret him?
isn't it? Yeah, there's a few interpretations of it. One was their master, and then there were one or two other theories out there on how it was. What's the if you can explain the picture on the right, Mark?
Lily. Yeah, so this is the name of the face on the stairs that Croak is obsessed with.
Hmm.
Um,
Is it odd? I can't see who it is in the picture though. Or does that
oh,
make a
that's
difference?
no. I just Googled face on the stairs, and then
Okay, right, yeah,
this
okay.
this
That makes sense.
this still of some Audrey
Mm.
Hepburn
I thought it was Audrey
film.
Hepburn, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That kind of
It's
threw me a bit, you know.
Yeah, she's the face on the stairs in
No, it
this
makes
particular
sense.
case.
Right.
I somehow doubt that the Beckettian Lily is as beautiful
Mm.
as Audrey Hepburn. You know,
Might say Croak's
typically
a bit.
they're
Oh, excuse me. Sorry, go on.
well. I mean, typically Beckettian women are like old crones. You know, so who knows what Croak found attractive? My image of Croak is of a old scarecrow type person,
Curmudgeonly
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I got of
Possibly
it.
deformed with this in the slide here we see a picture of a shillelagh, which is a, walking stick / club. So in the script it says that Croak has a club which is kind of a symbol or totem of his authority, right? Like
Mm.
he what do you do with the club? He pounds it on the floor when he demands attention.
Right.
And then, you could say maybe the he's the stand-in or the alter ego of Beckett himself, who is commanding words and music to work together to
Who is
create
he
something.
to do it right? Exactly. Yeah.
So it could be, Joe and Bob are literally words and music, but they're also literally the actors in the play.
Mm.
And as we said, they have those abstract qualities too. So often with Beckett, you've got, multiple levels of meaning. Well, always with Beckett, you've got multiple levels of meaning. Yeah, so Lily is in parentheses here because she doesn't appear, right, other than as an apparition that Croak sees. I mean, she basically exists in his
His
memory.
imagination, right, or his
Yeah.
memory. Yeah.
So I guess the whole point of the radio play, the plot, such as it is, consists of Croak trying to force words and music, Joe and Bob, to collaborate and to harmonize, I guess you could say, work together to produce something beautiful for his amusement, right? Like it's for Croak's
He's the master, as it were.
delectation. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the master. I mean, he's also, I guess he could be the author. He could also be the audience, right? Like maybe he's the viewer or the listener, demanding to be entertained.
I think this is where the difference between your radio play and your stage play can really make a difference. Okay, one's on radio and one's live, as it were. But in the sense that the way you described it there, I think if you saw it as a performance, a live performance, then you might get a different not a different interpretation of it, but you might see it in a slightly different way. Whereas in the radio play, of course, a lot of it is suggested or implied, and you have to go with that.
That was another problem I had, like the lack of visual. The version
It's
I
really
watched,
sparse,
yeah, and often you don't know who's talking or singing, or I mean, when it's music, you know who it is, but like sometimes it's not clear whether it's Croak sighing or moaning, and then what do these sighs and moans mean? What do these silences mean? The version I watched on YouTube, toggled between pictures of Beckett and Feldman to show, okay, this is words and this is music. And then when it was Croak, it was just like a black screen. So that helped a little bit, but I think it would be more interesting in some ways to see an actual play. Like, let me just go back to this. what do you think? Look at this guy covered in blood here. Who do you think that's supposed to represent? Is that Croak?
I think that's Croak, yeah.
I mean, that's quite a different. This guy looks young. He's covered in blood. What's going on there? Is just
Is it just a poster to make you think? Right? You know, in that sense, is it a visual device used to get your attention?
It definitely gets my attention, but
absolutely. As does the blue one as well. The blue one looks a bit more like something from Kraftwerk or something like that, right? A bit more.
Yeah,
I don't know,
and
is that Beckett we can see? I don't know, but anyway,
I guess these three figures. Well, it might be,
or it could be the three.
That's what I'm thinking.
Three characters, yeah.
Yeah, Croak and Words and Music, which that's another aspect. You know, we talk about the dichotomy of words and music, but it's suggested that really it's a trinity, because you've got the words and music, which have to be coordinated by some editor or author, or maybe it's a composer or a songwriter, right? So we think of words and music as separate, right? But they have to form a unity of opposites as well, and that unity of opposites is controlled by a third force, which is the composer or editor or author. So that it's kind of like words and music and
right, there's the third leg.
The third element, right? The third mind. As I think that's a phrase from Burroughs, the third mind. Like you know, there's or in Hegelian terms, there's thesis, antithesis, and then the synthesis is the third element. The well, you probably know the German Aufhebung, right? The neutralization, but it's also a kind of elevation, you know? So, I don't know. There's so many possible interpretations.
At the end of the piece, or even at the end of the text part of the play, were you any more involved in the characters? I mean, did you find you went along with the characters? Did they develop for you as you would like, or as you thought, or at the end of it were you kind of just like, oh well?
I felt like I immediately, I'll tell you what I did. I immediately went to find the script, because I just listened first. That's it.
Right.
And then
me too.
Maybe it's because I'm such a verbal person. Like, I immediately wanted to read the scripts. I went and found it online and printed it out and read it, like, as soon as I possibly could, because it just listening, because I was so easily distracted, and because I listened in 10 minute chunks. I felt like, what's this? I missed quite a bit, and I wasn't, like, it's because I wasn't engaged. If I had been engaged, I would have understood it much better. But I just was I found the music so off-putting. So I think I was much more engaged by the text, by the music, but there were so many pauses and silences and interruptions that
there's a lot of this, right?
Yeah, I couldn't concentrate. And again, if I saw it on the stage, like, that visual element would help me engage more with the text, right? It would be, I think, a more powerful experience. That extra sensory element, maybe.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, the sense of time and that use of space. Maybe I said this earlier, but that kind of, there's a lot of this, and you're anticipating what's coming next, or when it's coming next, or who's coming next, and there's a lot of this kind of left hanging in the air.
Yeah, well, I mean, more than anticipation, I just kept looking at the
right.
time left. 5 more minutes.
It's
2 more minutes.
It's a weird 40 minutes. I mean, it's a kind of, listening to it feels an awful lot longer.
Oh, yeah. But was that the case on the second, third, fourth, fifth
Yeah,
listen for
I
you?
didn't. I didn't feel it speeded up any. No, it was
Yeah.
kind of. It just. I don't mean it dragged, but it could have. Yeah, it. I don't mean that in a negative, wholly negative way, but I was coming at it from never having heard this before. I thought, well, okay, there's a lot of silences in there, and what does all this space mean, and this kind of repetition, and the use of croak here, the walking stick and things like that, the beating or the banging of this kind of thing. What do all these kind of elements mean? What do they add to it?
I really think the problem is the music. I mean, just think if the music, you just kept the text, the words are the same, but the music were composed by this guy we're talking about, Barry Young, for example. Or let's say the music was composed by, Elton John or David Bowie or Paul McCartney, or I don't know, Brian Ferry, you name it, Bob Dylan, like, or Miles Davis, like, wouldn't it? I think that would be a completely different listening experience for me.
Maybe a bit more immersive, or fully immersive in that sense.
Yeah, or even Steve Reich, or I don't know, someone like Edgard Varese, one of these noise symphony guys. Like, it was just, I think it would be more appropriate. I just found Feldman's music to be very conventional. Like, it's very vanilla and, frankly, to me, boring. But I've run him down long enough.
All right.
I probably should stop. Let me share some of the messages in the chat. This is from friend of show Steve. I don't know if he's still there, but he says, I've been thinking a lot about Crap's last tape recently. I've been thinking about a lot of crap recently. Are you going to talk crap, K-R-A-P-P, crap, C-R-A-P, in any way in relation to your fundamental thesis? Well, Steve, I'm not sure we've arrived at our thesis yet. I'm still struggling to find something interesting and profound to say about words and music, but maybe we'll get there eventually. As far as Crap's last tape, it's been a while since I read that and watched a performance of that. There was an Edward Albee directed performance in Houston that I think I saw many, many years ago. And then, like, the Irish National Theatre did a series of Beckett on film. They basically did all of Beckett. It was a Beckett on film series. It was on YouTube at one time, and I watched pretty much all of those, I think. But I don't remember the connection between crap and music. Do you? Are you familiar with Crap's last tape? No. He's basically recording tapes of himself musing on various things. I don't remember there being music, but I'll have to look at that again. If you're still there, Steve, maybe you can tell us more about Crap's relation to music. And then...
Well, he makes an interesting point here when he says, but does the music hold up on its own, right? So much as you were saying there about Feldman, it's a similar question.
Yeah, his later comment says, Barry Guy, this is that bass, I guess, avant-garde jazz bassist, solo bassist that we're talking about. He says, this is Steve again, Barry Guy reminds me of Derek Bailey's stuff. Crap, I don't know Derek Bailey. Show notes. Amazing to watch, riveting even, but does the music hold up on its own? Okay, so yeah, interesting question. And I would say, in the case of Barry Guy's fizzles, for me, you are the one who introduced me to his stuff, Craig, 10 minutes before
right. As we do in our showbiz kind of way,
yes. That's why we're late, because I wanted to incorporate that into the slideshow and into our discussion because it's fascinating. But as we'll discuss later, he wrote these 5 pieces called Fizzles, inspired by Beckett's collection of short fiction called Fizzles. And as Fizzles, I think they do hold up because why? They're short. You know, if they were 40 minutes long, maybe they wouldn't hold up. But they're short
there would
little.
be less fizzle in there, I think.
Yeah, they would fizzle out. They would
fizzle out. Very good.
but you know, being what they are, short little expressive pieces or impressionistic pieces, maybe. I think they work quite well. I mean, they're and just
they're definitely more dynamic.
Yeah, more dynamic, right? Although, as you say, maybe it was the repetition, and we'll talk more about repetition in a bit, but maybe it was the repetitive nature of Feldman's score or composition that Beckett liked, insofar as he liked it. But again, I want to say Beckett's brother composed the original.
Apparently so,
music,
yeah.
Right?
Patrick? I can't remember his brother's name.
Yeah,
maybe.
That's a good Irish name.
He wasn't Patrick and Samuel. He wasn't too keen on it, or did they do a production of it? But yeah, I read that anyway, that his brother was involved in it, but it was too, I don't know if it was too classical or whatever. Whatever the result was, he didn't like it.
Yeah, and he disowned it and withdrew it from publication and forbade anyone to produce it or something. That would be interesting to hear. Like, how does that differ from what Feldman produced? But yeah, just insert your favorite musician. Like, what would they have come up with for Bob's part? Just like, even if it were just, instead of a chamber music ensemble, orchestral instruments, let's say it was like an electric guitar. What if Hendrix were Bob? Hey Joe and Hey Bob, right? Beckett as Joe and Hendrix as Bob. Like that, to me, that would be so much more interesting.
I think if you add more musicality to it, or more musicianship, or more showmanship, whatever word I'm looking for here, it might, in the eyes of the writer, it might detract from that kind of, from what the point he's trying to make. It's not one or the other, or one over the other, or one instead of the other. They're two things together here.
Although in the beginning they're kind of competing, so it would be interesting to have.
That's true. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to have Joe trying to scream over Bob rocking out on his guitar with a lot of feedback through a Marshall stack, or whatever, some crazy industrial sounding stuff. Like, there's so many ways to make this a more interesting production. And again, the more I talk about it, the more I want to
Two, Mark, you said this was written, or when it was first?
I've seen a couple of dates, 61 and 62, but yeah, right around there.
I think the music sounds a bit dated. The performance, anyway, it's okay. It was 62, right? But I don't mean it literally that old, but it does sound a bit,
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's supposed to be modern.
Now you mention it.
He's supposed to be a modern,
absurdist,
20th century avant-garde composer. I don't know. Even if it were like Schoenberg, whom I mentioned before, like the 12-tone stuff, that would be interesting. Stravinsky or as I say, Edgard Varese, just like a noise symphony, or any number of things. Like maybe it's just like an African drumming ensemble, like they can just communicate with talking drums. That would be like more compelling than Feldman's stuff. We're really running him down. I'm sorry, Morton Feldman and his friends and family and so on, but yeah, I just can imagine this being so much better with like a more dynamic. I think dynamic is the right word, which is how you described it earlier. Something more dynamic, innovative, expressive. Yeah, I mean, just thinking about what it could have been inspires me, and I just feel so disappointed in what we actually had. But yeah, it would be interesting to hear what Beckett's brother came up with. We're supposed to be doing a synopsis, and we really haven't gotten very far. So let's go ahead and point out that there are three themes that are written and sung and, I don't know, composed on. So the first one is sloth, one of the seven deadly sins, right? We hear Joe expostulating on this topic, and it's kind of a set piece that he's memorized almost. He just wants to deliver it mechanically and not think about it. But when Croak appears, Croak demands to hear words and music about the topic of love, because of course he's thinking about the face on the stairs.
Right, exactly.
Lily, Audrey Hepburn, but probably in her 80s or 90s, an octogenarian Audrey Hepburn, perhaps. And so, Joe proceeds to deliver basically the same set speech, and he just substitutes the word love for sloth, and at one point he even gets confused and accidentally says sloth instead of love. So that's one of the comic moments of this. But at the same time, that and this would be an interesting exercise too, because in the script, the stage notes say soul music. What does he say? Soul and love music. So, like, what's that? What does that sound like? So it would be interesting to, as an exercise, to compose soul and love music to accompany the words. And then, because Croak is, I don't know, focused on his own mortality, he asks that the topic be changed to age, meaning old age. There's some clarification by Joe when the topic is love. He says, oh, you mean love of woman, and by age you mean old age, right? So that, yeah. So I don't know, here again I didn't feel like the music adequately addressed the theme. Was it effective soul and love music? Was it effective music about aging and mortality and death? Yeah.
The emotional impact of the music, I think, was lacking somewhat, or at least
yeah.
Without getting all down on a writer again, but it's. I think if you're trying to evoke these particular emotions, even if we look at it in a kind of modern context or even a rock and roll context of words and music and emotion, right? How it makes you feel or what you're talking about in your song, you get that reaction. Do you get that here? Or
no.
At least from the music part?
No, it was totally lacking. I'm trying to find the stage notes which describe it. I think it was soul and love music. Maybe I can find that later. But there are also, apart from these silences, there are also these sighs. What do you think he's trying to communicate with the sighs? Oh, here it is. Love and soul music. Yeah. And that's another thing I should have mentioned. Music, that is Bob, also, he doesn't have a club, but he has his director's baton.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting too. Like each of these three characters has his instrument of authority, right? Like the music character, Bob, has his baton. Croak, the director, has his club, and although it's not explicitly mentioned, the words character, Joe, I guess he would have his pencil or pen, as in guitar and pen, right? Like he's we don't see him writing anything, but maybe he composed it before he delivered his peroration or recitation or whatever it is. I mean, that's another interesting aspect of words, right? Like what's the difference between the written word and then the oral word,
Spoken word.
the spoken word, yeah, and its relation to music. Like, if you can think of songwriters who are very literary in their words, in their lyrics, right? Think of Dylan or Morrissey. These are guys who, are very literary. They're very much, you can just, that they wrote their lyrics in a notebook before they sang them, They're basically writers who sing, as opposed to, I don't know, I was going to say McCartney, but maybe not. McCartney can be literary as well, but less so. It's more about the musical quality. Not to say that his lyrics are shit, but, they're more...
Well, he did do that Rupert the Bear song, so...
Oh my, I don't know about that
is
one.
It the one. Is it the one about the frog chorus or something? Anyway, it's, yeah.
Oh, no. I'm not sure
We've
I want
all
to
got
know
one of
about
those
that.
in the closet. No.
Well, I'm just thinking of, I don't know, some of the songs on... I mean, that's what he's criticized for, right? Like,
true.
it's always Moon and Spoon, You can listen to some of the songs on the first McCartney solo album, or really, anything he's ever done. It's like the lyrics are just an excuse for the music.
I need something to go with it, right?
Yeah, like the lyrics are just placeholders.
An afterthought in a wee bit, yeah.
Yeah, but they work and they're effective, and I don't know, it's not like the kind of garbage we sometimes hear from other artists, but there are these songwriters who I would say are more literary, and I don't know, that's maybe it depends on one's mood. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? But like, how does that, maybe Roger Waters is another one, right? He's more literary and Gilmour is more musical, but like, how does that affect the words part of the equation? If it's more literary or less literary, what are the pros and cons? What are the positive and negative aspects of that?
Up on this phrase that I was reading something, an interview, and the interviewee was called John McGrath. He wrote a book called Samuel Beckett: Repetition in Modern Music. And in the interview, I can't actually remember who interviewed him, but anyway, they get into Beckett, and John McGrath's a musician and a professor as well, so coming from both sides of it. But he started talking about, or what I picked up from the interview, he was talking about Beckett's texts become free of explicit meaning and instead can be read more like music. So that gave me a bit more food for thought, just as you were mentioning there about the words in music itself.
The words, the lyrics actually towards the end become, and I've got an example of this later, but they actually become almost unintelligible, like they're ungrammatical. Well, it's kind of like stream of consciousness, like Joycean stream of consciousness. So I don't know if we can say like words, or I should say Joe's lines, contributions become progressively incoherent. I don't know if I'd go that far, but they become more like rhapsodic and like less tied to language and more musical, as you say. So is Beckett saying like that's the ideal, to ultimately transcend language, even though you're using words, the goal should still be to like go beyond words with words, if that makes sense. If that's even possible. But like you're still using words, but you like transcend language. Is that possible? And what should music do? Should music try to be a language, or is that like defeating the purpose of music, which is to transcend language? And then, what does that say about the songwriter's craft? If it's a song, it's got guitar and pen, it's got music and lyrics, Otherwise, it's an instrumental piece, right? And
Right.
that's what a composer does, as opposed to a songwriter, at least in my conception of it, right? Like if it's
Mm.
a song, by definition, doesn't it have lyrics at least, or at least some kind of vocalizing? Otherwise, it's not a song, is it?
Right.
It's an instrumental. It's a jam. Um, it's a concerto or something.
In the interview, he talked about this as, or he described it as semantic fluidity.
This is the John McGrath.
This is it, yeah.
Yeah. Semantic fluidity. Yeah. So it's open to interpretation. There's no one meaning. There are multiple meanings and perhaps meetings. It's polysemous. There's polysemantic significance. I mean, maybe that's true of the best songs also, right? They mean more than one thing. They're personal, historical, mythological, their cultural commentary, their musical commentary. It's music commenting on music. Like the best songs should maybe do all of that. Okay, looks like we're finally getting somewhere with this. Maybe we're making sense of this after all. All right, so I think we've completed the synopsis of the so-called plot, such as it is. Hold on just a second. Oh, okay, so yeah, we've already started trying to answer this question, lessons learned. I mean, it's still pretty vague, and maybe it'll require more reflection after we turn off the cameras, but what do you feel like this taught you as a musician or an audiophile, a listener, an appreciator of music? What do you feel you gleaned from this, if anything? Don't listen to Morton Feldman's stuff
Right, so
ever again. Besides
replace that with a soundtrack of choice,
Yeah.
It's a good point. I wrote a couple of things down, so it was a bit more like we mentioned dynamics earlier, and this kind of the impact that it has, or in this case it might not have. It's lacking in this kind of respect where it adds, if you're listening to a classical piece or something, the conductor there or the composer might use this element to add different emotional aspects to the listening experience and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But what I thought about, like, if we just take the two things separately, or together rather, words in music, Beckett's use of words in music, it kind of adds this emotional depth and a more intricate exploration of relationships, word in music, as it were. That was one point. I'm going to pass it back over to you, Matt, see if you can make anything of my ramblings, and then I can pick up again.
Well, let's try this. This is a quote from the play itself. This is Croak talking to words and music. He says, "My comforts," an interesting way to think about words and music. They can provide comfort. He says, "My comforts be friends." They have to work together if they're to be, effective in the context of a song. They have to work together. I mean, it's kind of like the sound and vision formula
that's
that I'm
how it
always
works, right?
Yeah,
it's,
that's what I'm always referring
can't have one
to.
without the other.
Yeah, like they have to complement each other. They have to harmonize, work together. They can't fight each other, right?
Exactly, yeah, right.
Yeah, like if
Fight
it's
for
all
the
lyrics
top
and
billing.
no music and all music and no lyrics, there's something off. You should find that balance of sound and vision, which is, not easy to achieve, but that's the ideal, right? Like the ideal song should be musically kick-ass and lyrically kick-ass.
Be something to think about, or at least add to the party.
Yeah. I mean, however, I would say that personally, I'm more drawn to lyrically compelling music than maybe most people would be. Like, the lyrics are very important to me.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. Lyrics can definitely leave a more lasting impression. Music does to a point, but lyrics can take it that bit further if you're so inclined.
I guess it depends. Like some lyrics can have that indelible, unforgettable quality, but
it's like the earworm, right? Is the earworm the melody or the lyric?
Well, just think of the, famous earworms like Beethoven's Fifth, or I don't know, something from Tchaikovsky, 1812 Overture or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those musical phrases and statements are as profound and memorable as, a quote from Shakespeare.
That's true.
I guess it kind of depends, but in the context of the song, since we're talking about songwriting and songs more so than like orchestral music, lyrics are very important to me. There's maybe like an imbalance, like lyrics
may be a bit
probably
skewed.
Yeah,
like
I think for me
personally,
personally, yeah. And that's why I'm drawn to these like literary songwriters like those I mentioned, Dylan, Morrissey, maybe Sting to a certain extent, but sometimes he can be almost too literary, too pretentiously literary.
Right, he was an English teacher, was he not?
Oh yeah.
I think that was his original before he became all Bumblebee and did his alter ego took over, started playing the lute and all that.
That's what Don't Stand So Close to Me is about.
Right,
Like some young student was like stalking him and harassing him, making him uncomfortable. So, I mean, I guess that's one of the lessons we can glean from this. Music and lyrics, words and music should be friends.
I did have something else to add. Yeah, exactly. I did have something else to add. So it was more about the power of language in music, just as we mentioned earlier about one of the earlier slides, whether it was opera or rap, hip-hop, whether it was contemporary modern music, whether that's rock or pop or metal or whatever, but this kind of power of language in music to evoke emotions and kind of inspire change and connect with listeners on a deeper level. If I look at it from that point of view, the lyrics really mean so much more to so many people. So if I summarize that, lyrics can leave a more lasting impression, I think.
But the lyrics you could say that the music like turbocharges the lyrics and makes them more powerful and memorable. David Byrne talks about this in his book How Music Works.
All right, I haven't read that yet.
Oh, it's you'd probably like that. There's some useful information just about like his recording experiences and his compositional process and everything, but also general reflections on music. Actually, that would be a really good text to do an episode of Guitar and Pen on, just trying to discuss like what he has to teach us about songwriting and music production and listening and so on. But he says like, consider the audience for poetry and the audience for pop songs. Like there's no comparison. You can write poetry which a few people or maybe many people will read, but you'll never have the audience that a great songwriter can have, because the music gives the lyrics, even if they are poetry, right? Like some of these literary songwriters, their lyrics are poetry. You read them on the page, they're poetry, but the experience the listener has, it's so much more powerful and meaningful when the lyrics are turbocharged with
something
music
to go with it. There's something just to kind of elevate it and to really lift it into that next.
It. And this is, the oldest poetry that we know of and have. All of that, like, just think of like ancient Greek poets, ancient Chinese poets, even going back to like the Epic of Gilgamesh or something. We have those texts, right, that we read either from papyrus discoveries, or like cuneiform tablets, or bamboo um, strips that were tied together in ancient China. All of those so-called poems were sung. They all had musical accompaniment. In fact,
Right.
our word lyric is related to the word lyre, Lyre, not Liar. So, like, poetry is meant to be sung in many cases. Even Homer, like, that was recited, and there was a bard playing like a lyre or a kind of harp or something accompanying him. Even like the Beowulf poet, the
Right.
guy reciting the epic of the great Anglo-Saxon hero. There's a musician off to the side accompanying the text, the words. So I don't know. We should make music more literary and make literature more musical. I don't know if that's the right formula, but certainly we should, even if we're just like writers and not musicians, we should try to make our prose musical.
If I can ask you, Mark, then, so if you've read more Beckett than I have, do you think there's a kind of musicality or a musical aspect of Beckett's work, in the prose itself? Do you think, I read a quote or a kind of paraphrase, and it said something like, the words almost sing themselves off the pages. It's talking about the musicality of Beckett's text. And it kind of goes into, no, what was it? Something like it flies into the reader's ear, something like that, the way it was written. But would you go along with that?
Well, he's certainly very careful with his phrasing, and I'm thinking of plays like there's one called Play. There are these three characters in urns. That's like the whole play.
Mm-hmm.
It's three urns. All you see are the heads of these three characters. So they're all dead. And they're all talking sometimes at the same time, sometimes separately. And it's very much like three singers, sometimes singing solo, and then sometimes singing as a chorus or a duo,
Mm.
or a trio. So that's a very musical play. There was at one time this Irish TV series I'm talking about. It was what's his name? Alan Rickman was the
Oh, yeah.
male lead, and then there were two. I can't remember who the female characters were, but it was based on these three characters. It was considered to be autobiographical. It was Beckett, his common law wife, and then his mistress. Those were the three characters, and it's like they're all
Fighting for
presumed
space
to
or
be
airspace or
yeah, they're all presumed to be dead, so they're speaking from beyond the grave, or as I say, it's almost like they're singing. So yeah, that's a very musical one. And you mentioned Billy Whitelaw. She
Yeah,
appears.
if you find that clip on YouTube, maybe I can send it to you. So the piece is just a mouth.
Yes, that's the one I'm thinking of. And I'm forgetting the Not I. It's called Not I.
Not I,
Yes,
yeah.
that's the title. Yes, and I don't know. Did you watch the clip? You saw
I
the.
did, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like it's that's like stream of consciousness too, and it's really like a spoken word performance. So yeah, I'd say it's very musical.
I could
And as
imagine
you,
something like that set to music or having music accompany it. I could see
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Have those dynamics that we talked about. I can see it right there.
Absolutely. And from what I've read and heard about Beckett's, direction, his directorial style, everything had to be just so.
Apparently,
So
we'd go into not practice, rehearsal with a metronome at some point. So he was known to do this. Phew. I'd be screwed,
yeah,
man. I'm like, okay.
yeah. There's that musical aspect. So
It's a very Catholic image as well, though, bringing the metronome along with you. What can I say, Anyway.
Okay, so the flip side of this would be together, dogs. That's when the music and lyrics, or the music and words don't harmonize.
Comply.
They're not being friends.
Right.
You have to remind yourself to force them to, if you can. Maybe that's not possible, but this is what Croak tells Joe and Bob. Together, dogs. I mean, that's another one of the comic moments. There's a lot of these. Well, it reminds me of Pozzo in Waiting for Godot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's Pozzo has this traveling companion, and he orders him. He says, "Speak, pig!" And so it's that's another characteristic of the Beckettian drama. This kind of sadistic
There's a kind of master and servant element to this.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Thing that we didn't
absolutely.
really talk about as well, but that's maybe a certain kind of subtext.
Master servant, and it's almost sadomasochistic, right? It's like
there's a very kind of dominant feel to it.
Yeah, right. And that's maybe what is Beckett saying? Is that like what the director of a play must be? Is he a kind of fascist with his metronome and his strict instructions to the players, like no, you said it wrong there, try again, do it again. Maybe that kind of dictatorial style is essential to the great work. Like if you're gonna produce a masterpiece, you need that authorial, editorial voice who is kind of a slave master or taskmaster. I mean, I was just in the studio yesterday doing edits on my audio book, and like the as they say, the devil is in the details. Right. I mean, it's maddening. It just, once you focus on these minor little issues that maybe no one else would even be aware of. But
they're there.
I know they're there, and I can't live with it. Like they have to be. They have to be fixed. Like I'm talking to the engineer. Can we fix that? And then he'll work his magic. I'm like, not quite. And then I mean, I hope I'm not dictatorial, but I don't know. There's like maybe he's saying there must be this editorial voice, this authorial voice, which organizes everything. And if without that, you've got chaos, and in fact, words and music will not be friends. They won't get along unless there is that third element which forces them in a way to collaborate and work together for the good of the,
for the greater being.
Yeah, for the greater good. But of course, Beckett always problematizes this. He says, yes, so the result is the great performance or the great artwork, but does it justify any of that? Because in the meantime, you've got this tyrant, this tyrannical editor, author, producer, director, making everyone miserable. So is it really worth it? Like all of this misery to produce so-called beauty. I like how Beckett always questions that. And maybe that's something we can do in our music and our other creations, not just
I don't know, would you call it the
songwriting.
search for perfection? I'm not sure if that's the right way to describe it, or the quest for perfection, or
it's an obsession. It's like I mean, you've heard of like Stanley Kubrick, actors who worked with him. They would tell stories about how he would insist on like 150 takes, like okay, go over there, open the door, walk into the room and sit down. No, do it again. No, do it again. Like 150 times. And people who work with him are like, what? But then, then afterwards they say, oh, that was the most amazing experience I ever had as an actor. But I don't know. There's also reports that like Shelley Duvall in The Shining.
The Shining?
Yeah. like he basically traumatized her, and she was like fucked up for years after that. And you could argue that like it stayed with her for the rest of her life. She was in a pretty bad way towards the end, from what I hear. Like she was pretty messed up. So
I do like Kubrick's attention to detail without being too obsessive, if that makes sense, because there's another thing that just came to mind there. He would write letters to the projectionists, so whatever film it was of his was playing, they would play a record in between turning the tapes over or the film over.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He would tell them how to do it, or when it should be done, or what side it should be, and all kind of very meticulously detailed. But quite a nice touch, though, I think, and whatever it was, music was played between the changing the film
the
over.
reels.
The reels, thank you.
Yeah, I wonder how many of those guys said, "Oh, okay, thanks," and then ripped it up and just did whatever they wanted.
It's quite a nerdy touch, but I suppose.
Yeah, I'm thinking
a nerdy obsessive touch.
Well, as you mentioned that, I'm thinking of another Beckett story. Like he was asked to produce something for a Kenneth Tynan production. I want to say the piece was called "Breathe." And he didn't like the way Kenneth Tynan staged it, so he like withdrew it, and he said, nope, you no longer have the right to produce this. Maybe it wasn't Breathe, maybe it was something else, but like, yeah, he was very particular. Oh, and another story, like there was a production of Waiting for Godot with 2 female actors. He's like, no, he didn't allow it. He's like, no, it has to be
it was
me.
very kind of strict instructions in how it should be performed.
Yeah. And that there's something about his excuse was, or his justification was, nope, women don't have prostates, so when Vladimir and Estragon go to take a piss, it doesn't work because it's just it's a different thing. So nope, can't do it. Sorry, ladies, no female production of
We'll save
Waiting
that
for
one for
Godot.
another day. There is a message I can see here in the chat box from Tomek, but I'll let you read it, Mark, rather than
Craig's bassy voice is like the voice of God. Hey,
well, I'll take it. Right,
there you go.
At least something worked.
Yeah. All right, so here's a possible solution to the problem of words and music being in conflict. Being in Germany, you probably recognize this guy. It's Richard Wagner, who is known for his concept of the Gesamtkunstwerk, which is the total artwork, right? So like in Wagner's operas, and I wonder if Beckett liked Wagner, because Wagner too.
I didn't read that. No, I read a couple of things. It was more, oh god, I want to say Beethoven and one or two others. I mean, that's not to say he didn't like the work of Wagner, but the short bits I'd read, it just mentioned other composers.
Well, I mean, I bring that up because you mentioned that both he and Feldman disliked opera, right? But Wagner too disliked the opera of his day, which is why he revolutionized opera with what he called music dramas, right? Like in his opinion, I think he actually said like, oh, the libretto in much Italian opera is just an excuse for the music, right? So he didn't like that because there was that imbalance. So he strove for a total work of art which focused on every aspect of the production. So the storyline, the libretto had to be great, the lyrics had to be great, and the music, of course, had to be great, and then all the details of the production, from costume to lighting to whatever else, like all of those details had to be considered.
Just so, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that's I don't know, maybe this is just a restatement of the balance of sound and vision that I'm always referring to.
Right.
When I reference that Bowie formula. So that's a lesson learned, perhaps, or a lesson remembered.
Yeah.
Here's one other thing that this is an example of that, language going beyond language or transcending language, language becoming more musical than literary. This is something that Words says towards the end, or Joe says towards the end. I'll just read it here. Then down a little way through the trash, towards where all dark, no begging, no giving, no words, no sense, no need, through the scum, down a little way, to whence one glimpse of that wellhead. And that wellhead is a powerful feminine image referring back to, Croak's idealized love, Lily, what Goethe would call das ewig weibliche, the eternal feminine. So yeah, there's some very musical stream of consciousness lyricism that occurs near the end of Words and Music. I don't know.
You should say this is more the exception than the rule, though, right? It's kind of, as you mentioned there's lots of space throughout the whole, let's say, 40-minute performance. You're not going to get as intense dialogue like this throughout the piece. It's very staggered.
Well, it's like outbursts, right? Like
exactly.
There's all this silence, there's sighing, there's, if it were on stage,
moans
it would be
and groans and all
moans
sorts
and
of
groans.
good.
And if it were on stage, it would be very static. And then suddenly there's a burst of lyricism, or a burst of
there's
music.
the dynamic.
Yeah. So I don't know if you apply this to. It's very rhapsodic. I don't know if you incorporated this into songwriting. I don't know. You'd get some kind of free association type lyrics characteristic of who writes this way. I don't know. I'm thinking of that Fish song, David Bowie, UB40. That's like the whole song. It just the only lyrics are David Bowie, UB40.
I've never heard that, no. So
it's an interesting one. I don't know. I think there's some Wilco songs that just have like silly wordplay, or think of like some Nirvana songs, even some Beatles songs. Come together. Here come old Flat Top grooving up slowly. Some Dylan too. All right, I've babbled enough, I think. I found this quote from Beckett. It doesn't appear in Words and Music, and I'm not sure where he says this, but it seems to be authentic. I don't remember reading it in any Beckett I've read, but it's online and attributed to him, and I like it, so I'll share it. He says, when you're in the shit up to your neck, there's nothing left to do but sing. So maybe that's what happens to Words or Joe in this piece. Like, they're just... It's not grammatical, it doesn't make much sense, but it's just a lyrical outburst, which...
There's nothing left.
There's nothing left. And that again reminds us of one of my favorite William S. Burroughs quotes: if you can't say it, sing it. So when
Absolutely.
you get to the point where, I'm just thinking of another song which transcends language, right? Do-do-do-do, da-da-da-da. Yeah. When the eloquence escapes you and blah, blah, blah. See, language fails me. I can't remember either. But yeah, if you can't say it, sing it. That's another tip for you songwriters out there. All right, so thanks so much for turning me on to this. Wow, what a great discovery wherever you found this. So we were playing this before the show officially started, but if you were with us from the very beginning, maybe you heard a sample of this. It's called Fizzles by a bassist composer named Barry Guy. We alluded to him before, but it's inspired. There are 5 short pieces for solo bass inspired by Beckett's collection of short fiction called Fizzles, same title. This makes me want to read Fizzles, and then while I'm reading it, I'll play Barry Guy in the background. That might be an interesting experience. And also for the show notes, you referred to this earlier. There's a book called Samuel Beckett, Repetition and Modern Music. This looks fascinating. It's by John McGrath, as you mentioned, You say he's both a professor and a musician?
At least so.
Yeah. So here's a little blurb. This is really fascinating. Makes me want to do an episode on Joyce and music as well. He says music abounds in 20th century Irish literature, whether it be the thought-tormented music of Joyce's The Dead, that's a story from Dubliners, the folk tunes and opera that resound throughout Ulysses, or the four-part Threnody in Beckett's Wat. I think I've read Wat, but I don't remember the Threnody. That's interesting. It is clear that the influence of music on the written word in Ireland is deeply significant. Samuel Beckett arguably went further than any other writer in the incorporation of musical ideas into his work. So that's the answer to the question you asked earlier. Musical quotations inhabit his texts, and structural devices such as the da capo, that's like from the top, right, are metaphorically employed. Perhaps most striking is the erosion of explicit meaning in Beckett's later prose, brought about through an extensive use of repetition, influenced by his reading of Schopenhauer's philosophy of music. Now, this is something I'd be interested in exploring too. Like, I'm not sure what they mean by Schopenhauer's philosophy of music. I've read volume 1 of The World as Will and Representation. Maybe it's discussed in volume 2, which is on my shelf. As soon as we turn off the camera, I'm going to go check. That's very intriguing. So exploring this notion of semantic fluidity, that's the phrase you mentioned earlier. John McGrath discusses the ways in which Beckett utilized extreme repetition to create texts that operate and are received more like music. And I just shared an example of that before, just a couple minutes ago. Beckett's writing has attracted the attention of numerous contemporary composers, and an investigation into how this Beckettian musicalized fiction has been retranslated into contemporary music forms the second half of the book. Close analyses of the Beckett-inspired music of experimental composer Morton Feldman, maybe we skipped this part of the book, and the structured improvisations of avant-jazz guitarist Scott Fields. Ooh, we got to look this guy up.
I had a look, but I didn't have enough time to find anything.
Okay, I'll see if I can put him in the show notes. Scott Fields, avant-jazz guitarist, illustrate the cross-genre appeal of Beckett to musicians, but also demonstrate how repetition operates in diverse ways. Through the examination of the pivotal role of repetition in both music and literature of the 20th century and beyond, John McGrath's book is a significant contribution to the field of word and music studies, and we're all about that. Word and music studies, that's a thing? Word and music studies? I'm learning so much from this episode. Didn't even know about that. Yeah, so a lot of
take a peek inside the box and you never know what's there.
Well, this is all thanks to you. I mean, had you not turned me on to these two very important pieces of the puzzle, this would have been a very dull episode indeed, because I feel like I just rambled for over an hour. I feel like disorganized with the slides and the rushing around, but whatever. Hopefully somebody learned something about songwriting or music or Beckett. And on the next episode, I will be discussing Morrissey's album You Are the Quarry with friend of show Steve from Idiotville. So that's something to look forward to. Are you familiar with this album, the solo album?
No, I don't think I've heard it. I might have, but I can't remember. I don't think so.
The
cool
world
cover,
is
though.
full. Yeah. What kind of gun is that?
It's
Is
one
that
of
a
those
Tommy
old
gun?
Tommy guns, isn't it?
A Tommy
That's what
gun,
it looks
yeah.
like, We've seen the same
looks like
movies, I think, Mark.
1930s gangster
It's like an
film noir.
Edward G. Robinson kind of thing.
There you go. Yeah.
Or some Like It Hot, maybe. Maybe they had it in that as well.
Yeah. I'm less familiar with this. The World is Full of Crashing Boars. That's one of the tracks, maybe the most well-known track from
I
this.
shall be sure to check it out.
Yeah. My favorite Morrissey solo album is World Peace Is None of Your Business from 2013 or 14, so I'll probably do an episode on that eventually. All right, so thanks for your patience, everyone. Sorry we were late getting started. That's totally my fault. Craig was here and ready to go. I was fucking around. I was disorganized. I babbled throughout, but hopefully you learned something. And if you're still with us, please subscribe to the Substack. That's Mark Will Wright, WRITE.substack.com. Thank you for your patience. I mean, this is probably not like the sort of piece you would choose to listen to, but you soldiered on, and
it's always good to try new things, Mark. To push yourself a little bit, you know.
That's true. So overall, was it a worthwhile listening experience? Are you glad
absolutely.
that you listened and participated in this episode?
Yeah, it got me more thinking about the theatre. I haven't been in theatre in years. Got me more thinking about that side of things rather than the musical side, funnily enough. So I suppose I was in it. We did Team Gilmore, Team Waters in our last episode, so maybe I'm probably still Team Beckett in this.
Team Beckett.
At the end of this episode.
I'll bet there's some interesting Beckett productions in Germany there.
You
should probably check the local cultural newspaper and see if there's any good Beckett productions. Who knows? Maybe they'll even do words and music. If so, report back to us. That would be interesting.
Will do, man.
All right. Thanks, Craig. Thanks to everyone else.
Pleasure, Mark.
All right. This has been Guitar and Pen. Farewell.